Alright, I'm on a roll! And let's see what the new song is on here. What? The Sony PlayStation 1, what a revolutionary console. It's got all sorts of cool technology in it. It's a game console capable of showing 3D graphics and has a full-on CD player inside of it. Well, this is the most weirdest CD player so far. And this console has a weird history behind it. Going back into the late 80s, Sony and Nintendo was teaming up to make a Super CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, just like the Sega CD. After that, it's a bit iffy. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know for sure that Nintendo partnered up with Philips instead of Sony, and then here we are now, one of Nintendo's biggest rivals ever. So what I think is best for the PlayStation 1 is to separate everything into like different sections. I'll try to talk as much as possible about the PlayStation 1, but while not making it too long, you know what I mean? And now let's get started. Boy oh boy, the PlayStation 1 is so cool. I mean, this thing looks completely different from what we've seen before. Even just ignoring everything about it except for the Sony logo, and they made a game console? That makes it even better. The PS1 has an impactful effect. A sleek design, games being stored on CDs. I mean, there's limitless possibilities now that they're using CDs. Instead of a cartridge in the box and that's it, they can have a lot more stuff like artwork on the inside, advertisements too.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service. If you feel you have reached this recording in error, please check.
You lied to me, game. But to get back on track, high quality soundtrack and cutscenes, just a game console alone, this is worth the money. What? Not only does the PS1 act as a game console, but it also acts as a fully functional CD player too. Being able to buy a CD from your local store and pop it into the PlayStation 1 and listen to it, PS1 is pretty impressive. In some spots it's even better than the Switch just because it can play CDs. That's awesome. Even the PS5 can't play CDs. It's better than the PS5 Pro. But now let's talk about my experience with the PlayStation 1, shall we? My experiences are mixed. Personally, I never really had a PlayStation 1 growing up. If I was to play a PS1 game, I would always pop it into a PS2 or PS3 to play it. It wouldn't be up until 2 years ago where I get my first PlayStation 1. And since I had it for that long, I feel confident enough now I can talk about it. And yes, while I did have some games from the PS1 era, the collection I had wasn't really massive. It was maybe like a few games from my childhood I had, and that's about it. But since I have a PS1 now, I had to get some games that best suit me now. So I got Crash Bandicoot, SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge, Resident Evil, Rayman, Gran Turismo, and a few others I wanted to try out and see how they are. And technically, I already did look at Gran Turismo, but yeah, I don't want to talk about it. But before we get into the games, we gotta talk about the one thing you're going to use while playing a game. So the PS1 technically has two different controllers depending on when you get the PS1. You have the PlayStation 1 controller, but this one is, well, if you squint, this one looks like it takes a lot of inspiration from the Super Nintendo controller, and I can kind of see it, but the second controller is called the DualShock controller, and this is what we all know. The thumbsticks, the rumble support, everything is here. And this controller was so good that they used the same exact design for 3 generations. It's pretty much the same as the PS2 and PS3 controllers, but there's something about the PlayStation 1 version. This feels very sturdy. This feels like it's a little bit higher quality, even though it's the exact same. In the DualShock, it introduces dual analog sticks and a rumble motor. And what do I think about it? They're fine. When a game utilizes the features in this controller, it feels really nice. But if a game doesn't even know what these features are, it feels very off. Only about half the library supports this controller, since it was released about halfway into the console's life. If the game doesn't know what this controller is, then it just emulates the D-pad on the analog stick, and it feels really weird. This is the equivalent to playing a DS game with a 3DS circle pad, and even though you have the option to do it, doesn't mean it's better. And that was the controller. That's all I can think about. And now, since we got the controller out of the way, we can talk about the games. And the first PS1 game I wanted to take a look at is Crash Bandicoot. In my opinion, this game is top tier for the PS1. This thing feels like it can fit anywhere and still be good. It's a really cool game. It reminds me of the older platformers, but now it's in a linear 3D space. Really cool. You gotta try it. And the controls are I mean, they're pretty good. Sometimes I misjudge things in this game, but it's okay because this game, I have a spot for this game in my heart. And even though some points I might rage at it, it's still a fun game to me. Can I say the same thing for the sequels though? They're fine, but Crash Bandicoot 2 and 3 on the PS1, I never really had a personal connection with. I have the second one and I have tried it, and I just say, oh yeah, it reminds me of the first one. That's what I would say if I haven't played the game. Playing Crash Bandicoot 2 is amazing. If I were to just take a look at this without playing the game, I would say, yeah, it's Crash Bandicoot 1, but it's a sequel now. But no, this game has a lot of stuff new in it. The controls feel really nice this time, taking advantage of the full analog movement of the DualShock controller, and introducing a new moveset to Crash Bandicoot. And the next game I want to take a look at is, The Grinch for the PS1. Do I have to do it again? Normally, if it's a game this soon, I don't typically take a look at it a second time, but sometimes I like to stretch my own rules, so why not? The Grinch for the PS1 follows the movie of The Grinch 2000. I feel like it follows the plot fairly decently. Not exactly, but how are you going to translate a full-on movie into a game? The game is a bit annoying at times, but it's a licensed game, so you can't really get too far with that one. Now we could talk about definitely the best PS1 game. Hands down, I don't care what the other games may offer, it is SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge. I mean, do you blame me though? This one is so cool, they even offer a free phone number for you to call. Okay, so you disappoint me with the phone number not being connected. What else are you going to disappoint me on? But still, I like this game very much. This game is pretty good. Even though it's a side-scrolling game on the PS1, I am a sucker for sprite-based artwork this good. The PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64 had some of the best sprite work you'd ever seen. I mean, the PS2 did have some of that too, but they mixed in 3D models in with it too, and it just made it feel out of place. So with SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge, what your goal is to find a birthday present for Patrick, and you have to do various tasks around Bikini Bottom to get the gift that you want for Patrick. You go and explore the main areas from the show, but it's really fun for a SpongeBob game on the PS1. This game isn't the best SpongeBob game there is, but it definitely is not the worst SpongeBob game. The next game I wanted to test was Rayman for the PS1, and this game I had never played before. Yes, I owned this game for quite some time and I never played it because I never got to. Sure, I tried to make an attempt to play every game in my library at some point, but this one just kind of got lost in the backlog of games I never played but really wanted to. This game is really good. I mean, it's different from any other Rayman games you would see. This one is a simple side-scroller platformer. If you think of Rayman now, you pretty much think of, oh, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Rayman Raven Rabbids? Oh boy, don't I. Rayman himself is actually a platformer game that was made all the way back on the PS1, and this is the game that started it all. I mean, it's pretty unfortunate this game series kind of just ventured off what we know now. I mean, it's kind of silly at certain points, but also is heavily reliant on goofy, funny antics. Oh no! So the next game I wanted to look at is really good. Like, I'm super excited about this game. Why? Well, I mean, it's Spyro the Dragon, the best game that's ever made. The reason why I like this game so much is because it's voiced by SpongeBob's voice actor, Tom Kenny. Wow! Okay, in all seriousness, this game is actually pretty good. Like, I kind of enjoyed this game. Even though I never really played this game on the PS1, I actually played the remake when it came out quite a bit. And this, I was just amazed on the visuals of the remake. And looking at the original version, even though it's not as powerful as the hardware that the remake can run, the game still looks extremely good. I mean, they have in-engine cutscenes, which is pretty impressive to me for a game console this old. No matter if it was capable of it or not, it's still pretty impressive to see games like this do that. And now the final game is Resident Evil on the PS1. This game is pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like the best game in the Resident Evil series. I like it quite a bit. If I was going to play the first Resident Evil game, I would go with the remake because that one looks a lot nicer, and I feel like the controls are a little bit more refined in that version, but just the original version is pretty okay. And that was all the games I can think about. What do I think of the PlayStation 1? Well, I think it's a pretty decent console here. I mean, everything about it except for the memory cards. Those, no. Anyone who's used a game console during this generation, or even the next generation, has always known about the memory cards. These things I do not like. Logically, it makes sense on why they were made. You can't store or save data on a CD. You need some sort of cartridge to do that in the first place. And so that's where the memory card comes into play. And this thing, I lose all the time. In various game cases, there are little slots you can put the memory card into to keep your memory card safe and so you can find it for next time, but I lose track of where this went to every single time I go for it. Memory cards were very important, and they were so important that they lasted through the PS2 era as well. So the next thing I wanted to do was test some songs on the PS1, see how they sound. I mean, it's a CD player, so we gotta test it. And lastly, the CD player functionality of it. It's okay. Playing CDs on the PlayStation 1 is really good. The sound quality through the PlayStation 1 is pretty good. The menu is very easy to use, but there's only some issues I have with it. For one, the songs I would listen to don't really have a CD release, so I had to put them on a CD myself, then put them on the PlayStation 1, which it took me an hour and a half to figure out exactly what I need to do to get that going. Apparently, you need something called an audio CD to do that with. Yeah, I would just stick with the PS3. The PS3 still uses CD, so you can use an actual CD if you want to, but you can also use digital music files if you wanted to as well. And so, to wrap things up, the PlayStation 1 is a really good console. If you put the PlayStation 1 up against the PS5 and Nintendo Switch, it's really not going to win in most areas. Really, the only area it is going to win in is CD playback, and that's it. But putting it up against the Xbox Series X, it's definitely not a winner. But I still really like the PS1. Something about it is just a different experience than playing a PS1 game through a PS3 or a PS5. PS1, a pretty good console for a good stereo system and also a good game console too. And now since I got that out of the way, I can finally relax. Wait a minute.